First in line, we have Ridi Kanetal from Noxidity. Please come up on stage.
You want to sit down? Why
Enjoy.
don't you sit down? Why don't you sit down? All right. So, quick sort of background. We come from the investor and accelerator side, so we look at lots and lots of companies. And so we have 15 minutes. We'll make this very, very tight. Give us sort of maybe a quick 2-3 minute sort of pitch on what you're doing, what stage you're at, and ultimately what your end goal is and your biggest challenge. And then we will jump in. Will that work?
So Noxidity.
Yeah.
With Noxidity, we want to. We are using IoT-based technologies to predict corrosion in industrial infrastructure and machinery equipment. So by be able to predict, you can prevent corrosion and improve, reduce number of unplanned production breaks, and therefore optimize maintenance.
Okay.
So we started about 3 months ago, as an idea 6 months ago, and started really working on it 3 months ago. We've got first version of the prototype. We have a better idea. Like I have a team, and we have a better idea how to do that. We are currently speaking with a potential first industrial partner to work with in the paper industry, paper pulp industry, and that's where we're at. The biggest issues that we're trying to focus on is like, okay, at what stage can we get investment? How much product development do you need to do when you're dealing with an engineering solution kind of product? Is it different from how you normally think of startups? What's the benefits, advantages of taking angel and VC investment, being an accelerator, versus getting R&D funding from government sources and corporate industrial partnerships?
So just to clarify, so you started on this 3 months ago. Tell me a little bit about the problem. How big of a problem is this, and how much is this actually costing them? Is there specific factories or industries where this is happening?
Yeah, corrosion by itself is it costs the world over $5 trillion a year. Okay. It's a massive problem that is present in all industries. The industries we are looking at specifically are paper pulp, because it has a lot of corrosion problems, a very corrosive environment. And there not as many solutions in industries, companies focusing on that. And the other one is substations, electrical sub-power stations, because there's the IoT aspect and they're able to keep track of what's happening across the 500, 600 in Portugal, for example.
Okay. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, if you were going to describe your solution in terms of the inputs, the processing, and the output, can you just do that breakdown for us? How are you generating the inputs? How are you doing the sensing? What processing are you doing, and then what is the output
So
look like?
we're using mostly off-the-shelf hardware to detect parameters that lead to corrosion, such as temperature and humidity, but we also developed our own sensor that allows us to use a black box approach to corrosion that will allow us to do data analytics to be able to predict what the corrosion rates are going to be in the equipment itself.
What are they doing right now to fix this? Like, are there any solutions out there? Do you have any competition? Just curious.
There's no direct competition. There's coatings, there's different types of protections that you do to prevent, but there's no way of predicting it's not, it's something that you can work with. There's nothing direct competition as such. There is some, this kind of engineering solutions available in oil and gas, but they're very expensive because the sensors are expensive and the environments are much harsher.
Sure.
So by bringing the biggest problem with corrosion, it's a very localized problem. So if the temperature is higher here than here, you're going to get corrosion here, not there. So the fact that you're lowering the cost points of the sensors, you're able to put it in higher density, therefore more likely to detect something.
Can you talk about the sensor? Is it a system? Is it an optical sensor? What part of it is proprietary to you?
So the probe itself, we're going to have, we have a sensor for temperature, for humidity, and all these things are off the shelf. What's unique and proprietary to us is the sensor we are developing. Can't really talk much about it, but it circumvents the need of having sensors for ions, because ion sensors are very expensive. If you go buy a chloride ion sensor, sulfate ion sensor, it's very expensive. By being able to circumvent that, you're lowering the cost point.
Okay. Have you started discussing with potential customers? And there is something very interesting in the way you present your project, which is avoiding corrosion, which is not what you're going to do. You're going to avoid industrial issues, and I'd be interested to hear about the cost of those industrial issues which is potentially the way to sort of approach your client and sort of assess what's the pain that you're really avoiding.
Yeah, so
where are you in those discussions with potential customers?
So we've been speaking with a utility provider in Portugal and 2 of the paper pulp manufacturers in Portugal, biggest ones. They understand the problem, and with one of them we've had further discussions of like exactly where they want us to start solving the problem, which will be in corrosion under insulation. The problem they have is because they have insulation on top of your vessels, you can't detect, you can't see, you have no idea what the status of your infrastructure is until it's too late and things start leaking. So that's a problem they want us to really focus on, and it's a problem that's beyond paper pulp industry.
And that's a use case you're trying to focus on at the moment?
So we like the idea of working with that specific thing because it's not industry specific. Once we solve for the paper, we can easily move to other petrochemical industries that have the same problem.
So basically the use case is relevant for multiple industries, is the net, right?
Yeah.
So I think the question was, your biggest challenge is, do we fundraise, or how do we think about money? Because you do need some money, right?
Yeah, it's an R&D. There's a lot of R&D left. From one question, how much R&D and what stage can we go this? And the second one would be VC, angel, accelerator.
I mean, this is my perspective of just considering you haven't really even built the product yet. I think talking to VCs is probably a big waste of time. And this is actually relevant for a lot of people in this room. I've had lots of conversations with young startups where it's like, hey, I'm trying to raise money, and I'm like, okay, tell me about where you're at, and they've literally done nothing yet, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just like, well, why are you talking to institutional sort of investors like us, like when you should probably either be talking to when you have even built an MVP or product, in your situation where there actually are multiple uses of it. Grant money, there's nothing wrong with getting grant money sometimes because it's non-dilutive. I just don't know how much work it would be to do the grant money, either that or angel money, but I would not be talking to VCs at least until you have nailed down your use case and you actually have, in this situation, either some betas or some working sort of like projects where you can actually show results. Would you guys agree? And love to hear your perspective.
I mean, I would generally agree with you. I think, let me maybe attack it from a different point. I'll probably end up exactly where Marvin is, but what would make sense for an institutional, right? And I would say, like, on the face of it, this is exactly the kind of thing that I love. So, but for that to work, you would need a couple things to be true, right? You need to be able to convince investors that your team was in place more or less, that you guys knew how to both develop the product, develop the science. The science, productization, and go-to-market would have to be capabilities that the team has, even if you can't finance it yet, but the team would have to have those capabilities. You'd be able to hire those people. You'd have to be able to prove that the science works and that the productization is well-defined. You'd have to be able to prove that your technology is somehow deeply, in a proprietary way, different to anything else that's out there. It sounds like you have a pretty strong case that it probably is. And you have to be able to prove that you can prove that to customers, right? And you'd have to have a thesis around this is deployable in some reasonable time frame, both in terms of how much R&D it would take, because if it's 5 years of R&D and then 2 years of deployment, it's not going to work. But if it's 12 months of R&D and 6 months of deployment, a VC can finance that, right? And so I think if all of those things work out, and then you can show, okay, if we raise a $3 million round, here's where we'll be at the end of it, and there are enough VCs out there that are interested in these kinds of industrial applications, that constellation could potentially work. And I've invested in companies like that before. So I love that kind of thing. Most of the time, something in that equation isn't quite right yet. And so then you need sort of angel money or grant money to kind of get the ball rolling. But that's probably a 2 or 3 hour conversation, which I would be happy to have with you, because it sounds like there's a claim to proprietary technology, and I agree with you. I mean, I spent the summer painting Coraceal on oil tankers, and so I know this is a problem. So,
I would tend to agree. There's another route, which never to forget, but I just don't know how advanced your product is corporate money. A client is money. And so if you ever manage to sell a proof of concept or test or something with a potential client, one, it's money, and you can sell it potentially very high considering the problem that you're potentially solving for them. Two, this is super signal approaching to investors that A, client want it, B, you're a team that sells. And that's what investors love at the end.
Right. There's another thing I would strongly advise you to consider, which is, and you hinted at this already, so you're obviously already thinking this way, but you mentioned you want to prove that it's not industry specific, right? And I think that's like the biggest question mark facing the company, because if you can say, okay, I know how to do, this kind of, I can look through this kind of sealant in this kind of industry and provide 99% accuracy in this kind of industry, and that's maybe not $1 trillion problem, but that's a $2 billion problem, and this company is 30% of that market, and so for them it's a $300 million problem, they might buy you for 30 million. Right? You could be very, very wealthy and very successful and have adequate seed capital for your next 7 projects, right? Whereas productizing that and getting venture backing for that and taking that to market may not tick the boxes for a VC, right? There may not be enough customers. It may take you 2 years to verticalize it for every vertical, right? So it could be that in this specific case, the right thing is to do what you just said, find the right customer, find an initial customer, and then position the company for an exit to one of your customers who wants a competitive advantage. Right?
And this case study may actually give you very valuable feedback. I mean, not feedback, data on how well your technology performs, which in the end is very tangible value.
So I had one last big question, is that when you're working with potential corporate clients and partnerships, industrial partnerships, what are the key things as a startup that I should be aware to do or not to do? Not to, be, they might want equity, they want to invest.
Yeah,
what are the main things that
equity is a no-no in general at this stage. This is my opinion. And the other thing is just what is very, very common for startups. Make sure you charge appropriately. So what number you think that you would charge, you would, generally speaking, tend to undercharge. Price accordingly, double it or triple what you think beyond sort of what you're comfortable with. They can afford it. If you are solving a real problem, they will be able to afford this, because a lot of times, 99% of companies I meet undercharge.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that while you were asking the question, I was thinking that the number of VCs that understand this industry well enough to add any real value to you is probably close to 0. But there are consultants, and I happen to know 1 or 2 of them, but there are consultants in your industry that would know not only who the customers are, but they would know which individual at which customer is the kind of mentality that would be willing to take a risk on you, and as Marvin was saying, pay you up front, right? So if you can, it's not just some big refinery in Spain wants to potentially pay you $1 million. You need to find that one guy in some tiny refinery in France that wants to prove that he knows what he's doing and wants to give you $100K upfront to develop it, non-exclusive or whatever. It's more going to be about the psychology of that individual at the enterprise and building that relationship with that person, almost like you would with a VC, because they're almost taking it's like a venture customer, right, as opposed to a venture capitalist. They're willing to finance some development and some risk to get you where you need to go. They may acquire you, they may not, but
at least you have a pilot.
And these kind of solutions are like super industry specific. So most VCs, I mean, certainly me, I don't know enough about this industry to be able to give you any value. You need to become your own expert and then teach the VCs how to help you. Yep.
30 seconds. Any other thoughts? Any other final questions?
Just generally, for this kind of hardware B2B industry 4.0 product, what are the main challenges you see in this kind of industry when you go out there for an entrepreneur?
Hardware is just tough in general, right? Because I've done probably 6 or 7 hardware projects, and they're just really challenging because they're hard with the upfront cash that you need, and if you do well, you actually need more cash, so you're always trying to outrun the cash flow crunch. That's actually a big problem. And so that's a concern for investors in general, why you don't see a lot of investors who like hardware.
Would you say having a CFO or someone very good with finance and a critical part of the team for this kind of
No,
startups.
you need to know that. You need to know that. No, this is not something you outsource.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you. Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I can keep that. Thank you.